Bernhard Šlink pripada generaciji nemačkih pisaca koji su rođeni u godini kad nacistička Nemačka gubi Drugi svetski rat. Šlinkova generacija, koja je stasavala 60. godina prošlog veka, morala je, htela ili ne, da se susretne sa pitanjem odgovornosti za zločine koje je njihova zemlja nanela istoriji sveta, te se ta tema prirodno ulila u književni univerzum pisca. Šlink je rođen na severu Nemačke, nedugo posle savezničkog iskrcavanja u Normandiji. Odrastao je u protestantskoj porodici koja je dodatno razvila njegov odnos prema pitanjima etike i odgovornosti. Studije prava završio je u Heidelbergu, da bi kasnije postao sudija, a zatim profesor na Humboldt univerzitetu u Berlinu. Krajem 80. godina objavljuje svoje prve knjige, detektivske romane, koji se uvek dešavaju u slepim hodnicima istorije. Godine 1995. Šlink objavljuje roman Čitač, knjigu koja će mu doneti međunarodnu slavu i priznanje. Tokom svog kratkog boravka u Beogradu, gde je bio gost književnog festivala KROKODIL, Šlink je sa srpskim čitaocima razgovarao i o svojim naslovima: Bekstvo od ljubavi, Vikend, Letnje laži, Olga, Unuka. Celokupna njegova proza uranja u tamne kutke istorije zemlje u kojoj je rođen.
We don't choose where we are born, but we are marked by history from the very moment we open our eyes into this world. So you were born in 1944, it means by the end of the Second World War. How was it growing up in the post-war Germany?
I was lucky. I grew up in Heidelberg, and Heidelberg was not bombed. The Americans had decided they want the headquarters there, so they didn't bomb Heidelberg. And to grow up in a town that was intact felt good. I visited my grandparents in Darmstadt, 60 kilometers north, and that town was flattened by bombs.
Yes, but
And I remember as a small child coming back, I realized, oh, this is intact. How wonderful.
you were influenced by the past, about the recent past, the Third Reich, the Holocaust.
Yeah.
So how did you deal with that?
I experienced what many of my generation experienced. For the first 20, 25 years, the past was not very present. For a long time, I thought it was suppressed. But then, once we became fully aware of our past, we also became aware that for one it was the father or the uncle or the teacher or whoever from the older generation had been involved in something awful. But
And
still,
what were your reactions?
yeah, but still they were our beloved father or teacher or whatever. And to deal with this two-sided parent or teacher, wonderful teacher, but he had been involved in, or nice father, but he had been in the SS. And that, I think, marked our generation. And that was what we had to deal with.
What could you do with this knowledge about the past?
You have to live with the tension. I mean, one option would be, and very few of us I know, the son of Frank, the governor of Poland, who was of incredible cruelty. The son broke with his father completely. But most of us didn't do it. And the father, even though we knew what he had done, or the teacher, he still was a nice father and a good teacher. So to live with this tension just meant
Yeah.
take it.
Your father, he was a pastor,
Yeah.
and after the war, he became theologist and professor. Did you talk with him about the past?
I talked to him, and I remember one thing. in 1943, there was a chance that he might become professor again in Königsberg. And he thought, going to the East, is that a wise idea at this point in the war? And he went to Berlin and talked to old friends in the State Department, Foreign Affairs. And they not only told him that the war was lost, but they told him about Auschwitz. It was the first time he learned about it. And he came back to the family and was completely destroyed. My mother told often, with a white face. He couldn't believe what was happening. And another thing I remember, I found sermons that he gave after the war, right after the war. And he had no reason to be mild with the Nazis, but they were all about, okay, now the country is in ruins, we have to stand together, no prosecution, just look forward, rebuild the country. And I was completely amazed. In a way, the Nazi threw him out of his position. So I thought he would be strong anti, but after the war, there was obviously such a strong wish to look forward and to forget the past.
But you don't want to forget the past.
Well, we can't. We can't forget the past. I think every one of my generation, once he started to travel, he realized, I'm German, and I'm carrying this past with me. And that's how people address and approach me. And they want to know what I think about it and what my parents had done and how we, the German nation, are dealing with it. So, no, we couldn't escape that.
Hoću da se borim. Protiv koga da se boriš? Protiv sistema. Kaspar nije znao šta da kaže. Onda ju je upitao, šta je sistem? Pa sve. To što Nemačka više ne pripada Nemcima, što je strancima bolje nego nama, što Jevreji i njihov novac odlučuju o svemu, što ima toliko muslimana i džamija. Ne vidim da je strancima bolje nego Nemcima, a ni ti ne možeš to da vidiš. I gde si videla Jevreje koji svojim novcem o svemu odlučuju? Skrivaju se, kaže moj tata. Dakle, ni njih ne vidiš. Otkud onda znaš da postoje? Znam, zato što postoji laž o holokaustu. Da ne postoje Jevreji kojima ta laž koristi, ne bi bilo ni laži.
In your latest novel, The Granddaughter, you put on a scene 3 generations of German. First one, the granddaughter, who comes from the nationalist background. Yeah. Her father taught her that Germans were victims during the Second World War and that Holocaust didn't happen.
It never happened. Mm.
And there is a grandfather who tries to explain her gently that all those atrocities have really happened. So you show a clash of generations.
Mm. It was more, how do we deal with these new right-wing movements, people, and among them young people. And among these right-wingers, there are some with whom it's just hopeless to talk. They are so in their bubble that they can't be reached anymore. Others, I think, still can be reached. So it's important to keep up the conversation with them. And so he, the grandfather, he doesn't really try to convince her that her opinions are wrong. What he really tries to do is open her another world.
And when we talk about these right-wing movements,
yeah.
not only in Germany but in the world, I'm talking also about national populism, also about some phenomena of micro-fascism. How do you see it?
I'm worried. Of course, I'm worried. people, I think, long for something that they can belong to. At least in most Western countries, the church doesn't provide that anymore. And family isn't enough, so that's one of the reasons why nationalism has come back. And then also, I think, we have unlearned to appreciate what democracy gives us. So there is an authoritarian turn in our world. Poland, Hungary, Meloni in Italy, Marine Le Pen may come in France, Trump in the United States. We have an authoritarian turn or an authoritarian need, so people find democracy too challenging. And they have the idea if we have an authoritarian regime, things will be simpler and easier.
But do you think, do you see in our world the real example of democracy? And where, if you see it?
Well, I mean, it's never a picture book democracy. Germany is, I think, still a working democracy. But one of the reasons for the conflict between East Germany and West Germany is that the East Germans, after the fall of the wall, at the end of their dictatorship, expected in Germany a kind of a picture book democracy. And of course, democracy is most often messy. And there are intrigues and bad compromises and lobbyists and whatever. And still, it's a great thing to have democracy. But for many, it's too messy, too complicated.
Pitao sam je za njenu prošlost. A to što mi je odgovarala izgledalo je kao iskopano iz nekog prašnjavog kovčega. Odrasla je u Siebenbürgenu, sa 17 godina se obrela u Berlinu i postala radnica u Siemensu. A kada je imala 21, našla se u vojsci. Po završetku rata izdržavala se svakakvim poslovima. U poslu konduktorke kojim se bavila već nekoliko godina dopadali su joj se uniforma i stalni pokret, smena slika i osjećanje kretanja pod nogama. Inače, ga nije volela. Bila je bez porodice, imala je 36 godina. Sve to je ispričala kao da se ne radi o njenom životu, već o životu nekog drugog koga dobro ne poznaje i koje se ne tiče. Često se nije mogla setiti detalja koje sam hteo da saznam, a nije ni shvatala zašto me interesuje šta je bilo s njenim roditeljima, da li je imala braću i sestre, kako je živela u Berlinu i šta je radila dok je bila u vojsci. Šta bi ti sve da znaš, dečače?
In 1995, you published your novel, The Reader, and that book brought you worldwide success. The plot begins as a love story or an erotic story between the young boy, teenager, and an older woman.
Yeah.
And years later, we see your hero, who is now a student in law, who recognizes in the courtroom that woman he loved. And he learns that she's a former concentration camp guard. Mm-hmm. So what makes ordinary people do atrocities?
If only we knew. We know a little bit. We know Browning has written this famous book about a group of police officers who got involved in the killing of Jews in the East. And it's group pressure, and it's once you do the first step, in a way you are lost. Once you commit one atrocity, then why not the next and the third and the fourth? So people are drawn into it, and they think the first, well, this just has to happen, it's awful, but I do it now and then it's over. No, it's not over, it's just the first step. And then the others, they all do it. So who am I not to take part in it? These two things, I think, are crucial for turning normal, good people into awful perpetrators.
Yes, but you have been waiting for a long time to write The Reader, which is, in a way, a novel of your life. Why did you wait so long?
That's probably a good question for which I don't have a good answer. The stories come to me. And they come to me and some stay with me and stay long enough with me that I realize this is a story I want to write. And it didn't come before, it only came then.
At some moment, we learned that your main heroine, Hannah, is illiterate.
Yeah.
And what is the role of the fact that she's more ashamed of her illiteracy than of the fact that she's responsible for letting people die?
Well, I think when she actually kills these people in the church, when she doesn't open the door, she has already made many steps. We talked about the first step, so this is a late step in her committing crimes. And that she gets into this to avoid confessing her illiteracy, well, I think we who can read and write cannot overestimate how shameful it is. Illiterate people do pretty much anything to avoid showing that they can't read and write. It was interesting, David Hare, who wrote the script, he thought, can this really be true? And he talked to many illiterate people in England, where he lives and works, and they said, I would rather go into prison for a couple of years than let people know that I'm illiterate.
What do you do when you learn that the person you love is a war criminal or simply criminal? You still love her.
You can break with that person. And as mentioned before, very few of my generation actually did this. Or you have to live with this tension. I love her or love him, but I cannot turn my eyes off what the person had done. So love sometimes isn't easy.
Kad je pričala o Herbertu, više nije prećutkivala da je nastradao na Arktiku, na loše pripremljenoj i loše izvedenoj ekspediciji. Nije više preskakala ni rat protiv naroda Herero, a pričala je i o Prvom svetskom ratu, u kome bi Herbert tražio smrt da je već nije našao u snegu i ledu. Smatrala je da je ta kob počela s Bizmarkom. Od kad je postavio Nemačku na preveliko konja na kome nije mogla da jaše, Nemci su hteli sve preveliko. Po njenom mišljenju, nemačka obnova i privredno čudo takođe su bili prekomerni.
Two of your main topics are history and love. And in the novel Olga, you write about the history of Germany. In fact, it is a travel through different decades of its history.
Yeah.
From the period of colonialism, it's the end of the 19th century, to the Second World War and afterwards. Mm-hmm. So you're very interested in those dark inheritance of your country.
There are people who live happily in the here and now. I don't. I don't know why, but I live with my history. It's part of me, it's part of my identity, it's part of my place in this society and in this world.
When you talk about those German colonial aspiration at the end of the 19th century, is it a sort of introduction to what happened in 1933?
Some historians say that part of the colonial racism is what we then experienced in the Third Reich as anti-Semitic racism. I think that the colonial time was, as a German time, as bad, but not worse than what the French and the English and all the colonial powers did. colonialism was just awful. Why did it interest me? Why did it interest me, this story? I think in individual lives, you can draw those lines. And in Olga, the partner, the love of this young man who goes to German Southwest Africa and then goes on this expedition to Arctica that fails. She tells her son about his father as this great adventurer and as this great adventurer with great dreams. And that in the son triggered, oh, nowadays the great dreams are we conquer the East and colonize Russia or whatever. So I think you can see this in individual lives. But that society functions like that, that I find very hard to really prove.
Your hero, Olga and Herbert, they love each other.
They love each other.
And that's a beautiful love story. She loves him, he loves her, but all the time he's searching for infinity, for adventure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And she stays waiting for him all her life, even after his death. Is this a kind of absolute love?
He was the man of her life. And so in her thoughts, talking to someone, she talks to him. And she still writes him a letter now and then. But she knows that he is dead. And is it an absolute love? I don't even know what absolute love is.
But what is love?
Nothing is more multifaceted than love. You can't pin down love to this is it. There are so many ways in which people are deeply attached to each other.
You also write a lot about these various phases of love.
Yeah.
And we see the couples who live together, but they are not really together. They have their inner worlds, and they always keep that distance.
That's one way that couples live together, and they can still love each other. And they may know that getting deeper into the other person wouldn't work and would only lead to conflict that then would make the whole thing explode. So I think there are so many ways. There are very intimate relationships, love relationships that work, and there are more distant ones that work too. And there are relationships where secrets are being kept, and there are relationships with openness. I mean, again and again, I'm surprised when readers ask me after reading, why don't you write about normal love? And only then did I realize how many people have a normative idea what normal or proper love is.
What's your love ideal?
My ideal?
Yes.
I think I know it when I have it. I can't define it.
Sve priče na relaciji istok-zapad bile su ljubavne priče, s očekivanjima i razočarenjima kakva prate ljubavne priče. Živele su od radoznalosti, prema onome što je u drugome bilo drugačije, hranile se onim što je on imao, a ja nisam, i onim što sam ja imao, a on nije. Takve stvari već i same bude interesovanje za drugog. Koliko je toga bilo? Dovoljno da od zime, kada je zid pao za istočne i zapadne Nemce, učine proleće ljubavne radoznalosti. Zatim je ono što je do tada bilo strano i drugačije i daleko, odjednom postalo svakodnevno, obično i zamorno.
In some interview, you say that your prose and that your work is an embodiment of your imagination, of your fears, and of your hopes.
I'm often asked how autobiographical is what you write. And I think I mean, I know I'm always in what I write, but I'm not only in it by taking bits and pieces of my life. That's something I do as well. But I'm in it because I'm in it with what didn't happen to me, but what I was afraid it might happen or what I hoped it might happen. So that's what I meant. I'm in my books not just with what I experienced, but what I was happy never happened or what I hoped it finally would happen. So that's what I meant.
And about your fears?
Yeah, with what sure, my fears are in my books too.
What are your fears?
What are my fears? So, all kinds of fears. We talked about political fears right in the beginning. I look at this world and I'm afraid it's not going in a good direction. And there's nothing I can do, or hardly anything I can do about it. That's a fear. Well, I don't know whether you have children, but as a parent, of course, one has fears. How will it go with my child? How will it go with my grandchildren? I have fears about my beloved ones. I have fears about not doing well enough what I want to do. So, all kinds of fears.
But there is the third word, hope, a nice
Yes.
word.
Yeah.
So, what are your hopes?
Oh, I hope that the world, no matter what, will kind of cope with the challenges from nationalism and authoritarianism and climate change to atomic catastrophes and AI catastrophes. Of course, I hope that the world will manage to deal with these threatening catastrophes. And I hope that my granddaughters will become happy women. And I hope that I have a Alzheimer-free, nice old age.
Yes. And my last question is, why do you write?
I can't see my life without it. I don't know how I would get through life without writing. Maybe writing is a flight, an escape. There's an escapist element, certainly, in being in my world with my people and with my story. There's certainly an escapist element. But yeah, I need it. I just need to write.